When Evelyn Carter pushed open the rusted gate of her late husband's ranch after 15 years of abandonment, she expected to find nothing but dust and decay. What she discovered instead was a creature that shouldn't have been alive, a magnificent black stallion locked in a forgotten stable, somehow surviving in complete isolation. But the real mystery wasn't how the horse had survived. It was why her husband had hidden it there in the first place, and what secret he'd been protecting until the day he died. Before we dive into Evelyn's story, I need to ask you something. Have you ever returned to a place from your past and discovered something that completely changed how you understood your own life? Maybe it was a letter, an object, or even just a room you'd forgotten existed. Evelyn thought she knew everything about the man she'd married for 32 years. She was wrong. If you've ever uncovered a hidden truth about someone you loved, hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and drop a comment telling me what city you're watching from. Now, let me take you back to where this all began, to a dusty road in Montana, and a woman who was about to rewrite her entire past. Evelyn Carter was 73 years old when she made the decision to return to Clearwater Ridge. For 15 years, she'd avoided that place like it was cursed ground. The ranch, 200 acres of Montana wilderness, bordered by pine forests and a creek that ran silver in the moonlight, had been her home for 3 decades. It was where she'd raised 2 children, buried 3 dogs, and spent countless evenings on the porch watching sunsets paint the mountains gold. It was also where her husband, Benjamin, had died suddenly one October morning, collapsing in the barn while mucking out stalls, his heart giving out at 64 without warning or mercy. After his death, Evelyn couldn't bear to stay. The silence in the house was too loud, the empty spaces too full of memory. Her daughter Patricia lived in Seattle and begged her to move closer. Her son Marcus was stationed overseas with the military and couldn't help either way. So Evelyn had done what seemed practical at the time. She'd locked up the ranch house, hired a property management company to keep squatters and vandals away, and moved into a small apartment in Billings. For 15 years, she paid the property taxes, ignored the messages from realtors wanting to list the land, and tried to build a new life that didn't revolve around the ghost of Benjamin Carter. But here's the thing about running from grief. Eventually, you get tired. Evelyn woke up one morning in her sterile apartment, looked at herself in the bathroom mirror, and realized she'd become a shadow. The woman staring back at her had gray hair cut short for convenience, not style, eyes that had forgotten how to light up, hands that only knew how to hold a remote control or a coffee cup, never reins or garden tools or anything that mattered. That same week, the property management company called. They were dissolving, selling off their client list to a larger firm. Did she want to continue service, or would she prefer to handle the property herself? Something in Evelyn cracked open. "I'll handle it myself," she heard herself say. Patricia thought she was losing her mind. "Mom, you can't go back there alone. That place has been sitting empty for 15 years. God knows what condition it's in. Just sell it, please." But Evelyn had already made up her mind. Some part of her, the part that remembered who she used to be, needed to see that land one more time, needed to walk through that house and make peace with the memories, needed to close that chapter properly instead of leaving it to rot. So, on a crisp September morning, Evelyn loaded her sedan with supplies, drove 3 hours east from Billings, and turned onto the dirt road that led to Clearwater Ridge. The gate was worse than she'd expected. Rust had eaten through the hinges, and wild grass had grown up around the posts, trying to reclaim the metal for the earth. She had to get out and wrestle it open, her 73-year-old shoulders protesting with every push. When it finally gave way with a screech that sent birds scattering from nearby trees, Evelyn stood there, breathing hard, staring down the long gravel driveway. The ranch house sat in the distance, barely visible through overgrown cottonwoods. The barn loomed to the left, its red paint faded to the color of dried blood. Fences had fallen in sections. The garden she'd once maintained with pride was now a wild tangle of weeds and volunteer saplings. Evelyn felt her throat tighten. This was a mistake. Patricia was right. She should have just sold it sight unseen and been done with it, but she'd come this far. She got back in the car and drove slowly up the driveway, gravel crunching under her tires, dust rising in golden clouds in the rearview mirror. When she parked in front of the house and cut the engine, the silence was absolute. No wind, no birds, nothing but the ticking of her cooling engine and the thunder of her own heartbeat. Evelyn sat there for a long moment, gathering courage. Then she heard it, a sound from the barn, low and distant, but unmistakable, a whinny, the sound of a horse. Evelyn's blood went cold. That was impossible. There hadn't been horses on this property since before Benjamin died. They'd sold the last two, a pair of aging mares, the year before his death, when it became too expensive to maintain them. She must have imagined it, the wind in the eaves, a loose board banging, something, but then it came again, louder this time, insistent, definitely a horse. Evelyn got out of the car on shaking legs and walked toward the barn, her mind racing through impossible explanations. The barn door was padlocked. Evelyn stared at the heavy chain and industrial lock securing the sliding door, her confusion deepening. This wasn't the lock she and Benjamin had used. This was newer, commercial grade, the kind you'd see on a storage facility or warehouse. When had this been put here? The property management company had assured her they were just doing periodic drive-bys to check for damage and break-ins. They'd never mentioned changing locks or securing buildings. The whinny came again, from inside, and this time Evelyn could hear the desperation in it. Whatever was in there needed help. She tried the lock. Solid. No way she was getting through it without bolt cutters. She walked around the perimeter of the barn, looking for another way in. The side door was boarded up from the outside, not weathered boards from years of neglect, but fresh lumber, recently nailed. Someone had deliberately sealed this barn. Her heart was hammering now. Nothing about this made sense. Finally, she found a gap where a board had rotted away near the back corner, low to the ground. Evelyn got down on her hands and knees, ignoring the protest from her joints, and peered through. The interior was dim, but shafts of light came through gaps in the roof. It took her eyes a moment to adjust. When they did, she gasped. A horse stood in the center of the barn. A massive black stallion, easily 16 hands high, with a coat that might have once gleamed like oil, but was now matted and dull. The animal was thin, terribly thin, ribs visible beneath the skin. But it was alive, moving, watching her through the gap with intelligent, desperate eyes. "Oh my God," Evelyn whispered. The stallion whinnied again and stomped, the sound echoing through the empty barn. Evelyn could see now that he was in what had once been the main stall, but the gate was secured with another chain. Near the back wall, she spotted something that made her stomach turn. An automatic waterer, the kind that connected to a well line and refilled itself, and next to it, what looked like a gravity-fed grain dispenser, the kind you'd use for livestock you couldn't tend to daily. Someone had set this horse up to survive on its own. But who? And why? Evelyn pulled back from the gap, her mind reeling. She needed to get this animal out, needed to get it water and proper food and a vet, but first she needed to get into that barn. She rushed back to her car and grabbed her phone. No signal. Of course not. She'd forgotten how remote Clearwater Ridge was. The nearest neighbor was 12 miles away. Think, Evelyn. Think. The tool shed. If it was still standing and not completely ransacked, there might be bolt cutters or a hacksaw. Something. She found the shed behind the house, its door hanging on one hinge. Inside was a chaos of rusted tools and old equipment, but there, hanging on a nail on the back wall, was a pair of bolt cutters, their handles wrapped in electrical tape from where Benjamin had reinforced them years ago. Evelyn grabbed them and hurried back to the barn, her breath coming in short gasps. She wasn't as young as she used to be, and the adrenaline was making her dizzy. The bolt cutters made quick work of the padlock. It fell away with a satisfying clunk, and Evelyn hauled the barn door open, flooding the interior with afternoon light. The stallion reared back, startled by the sudden brightness. Evelyn froze, giving him space. Up close, the animal was even more magnificent and more heartbreaking. His hooves were overgrown, curling up at the tips. His mane was tangled with burrs and debris, but his eyes were bright and aware. This was a fighter, a survivor. "Easy," Evelyn said softly, using the voice she'd once used with her own horses decades ago. "Easy, boy. I'm here to help." The stallion snorted and danced sideways, clearly unused to human presence, but not entirely wild. He'd been handled before, trained even. Evelyn approached the stall gate slowly. The chain here was secured with another padlock, but the bolt cutters made quick work of it. She swung the gate open and stepped back, giving the stallion a clear path to freedom. For a long moment, the horse just stood there, as if he couldn't believe the barrier was finally gone. Then, with careful, deliberate steps, he walked out of the stall, into the main area of the barn, and finally out into the yard. The moment his hooves touched grass, something changed in him. He threw his head back and ran, a limping, awkward run on overgrown hooves, but a run nonetheless, across the overgrown paddock, circling, testing his freedom, drinking in the open air. Evelyn watched with tears streaming down her face. How long had this animal been locked in there? Months? Years? And then the bigger question hit her like a physical blow. Why? She walked back into the barn, looking for answers. The automatic waterer was still functioning, connected to the well. The grain dispenser was empty now, but the mechanism was intact. Whoever had set this up had intended for the horse to survive for a long time without intervention. Near the tack room door, Evelyn noticed something she'd missed before. A piece of paper tucked into a plastic sleeve and nailed to the wall. She pulled it down and held it up to the light. It was a note, written in handwriting she recognized instantly, even after 15 years. Benjamin's handwriting. Her hands started shaking as she read, "If you're reading this, I'm gone. Don't try to understand. Just know that Midnight has to stay here. He can never be sold, never be shown, never be registered. Keep him safe. Keep him hidden. I'm sorry for the burden. I'm sorry for everything. B." Evelyn read it 3 times, each word deepening the mystery. Midnight. The horse had a name. Benjamin had known about this horse, had hidden this horse, had set up this entire system to keep it alive even after he was gone. But the property management company had been checking the property for 15 years. How had they not noticed? How had the horse survived this long? Unless Benjamin had set up something else, some other arrangement she didn't know about. Evelyn walked out of the barn in a daze. The stallion, Midnight, was grazing now, tearing at the overgrown grass with an eagerness that spoke of long deprivation. She needed to call a vet, needed to get this animal proper care. But first, she needed to understand what her husband had done and why. Evelyn spent the rest of that first day trying to make Midnight comfortable and searching for answers in equal measure. She found an old bucket, filled it from the outdoor spigot. Thankfully, the well was still functioning, and brought it to Midnight. The stallion drank deeply, then retreated a few paces, watching her with cautious gratitude. She located some ancient hay bales in the loft that had somehow stayed dry and scattered a few flakes around the paddock. Midnight approached them tentatively, then began eating with an intensity that broke her heart. While the horse ate, Evelyn returned to the barn and conducted a more thorough search. In the tack room, she found evidence that someone had been maintaining this setup more recently than Benjamin's death 15 years ago. There were receipts tucked into a ledger for grain deliveries. The most recent was dated 3 months ago. They were made out to a company called Clearwater Feed and Supply, marked paid in cash, with no customer name listed. Someone had been feeding this horse, someone local. Evelyn took the receipts and went to the house. The front door was locked with the key she'd kept on her keychain all these years, never quite able to throw it away. Inside, the air was stale and thick with dust. White sheets covered the furniture like ghosts. Everything was exactly as she'd left it, frozen in time. She went straight to Benjamin's office. Her husband had been a meticulous record keeper, the kind of man who saved every receipt and documented every expense. If there were answers to be found, they'd be here. It took her an hour of searching through file cabinets before she found it. A manila folder marked simply M in Benjamin's angular handwriting. Inside were documents that made Evelyn's head spin. Bank statements for an account she'd never known existed. Automatic payments set up to Clearwater Feed and Supply, scheduled to continue for 20 years from the date of Benjamin's death. Legal documents creating a trust, funded with money she didn't know they had, specifically for the care and maintenance of one black thoroughbred stallion to be kept in private residence, identity protected. But it was the photograph that stopped her cold, a faded color print dated 37 years ago. Benjamin stood in front of a racetrack grandstand, his arm around a younger Evelyn, both of them grinning, and between them, being held by a man in a trainer's jacket, was a magnificent black colt with a white star on his forehead. Evelyn flipped the photo over. On the back, in Benjamin's handwriting, Derby Day, Midnight Storm, 3rd place, the beginning of everything. Midnight Storm. Evelyn sat down hard in Benjamin's desk chair, the pieces starting to come together, but still not making sense. Benjamin had owned a racehorse? They'd never had that kind of money. He'd been a ranch hand, working for other people's spreads most of his life. They'd saved for years just to buy Clearwater Ridge. Where would he have gotten the money for a thoroughbred? She kept digging through the folder. There were newspaper clippings, race results mostly, from tracks all over the West. Midnight Storm had been moderately successful, nothing spectacular. A few wins, several places and shows, but competitive. Then the clippings stopped, abruptly. No explanation. The next document in the folder was a bill of sale, dated 34 years ago. Midnight Storm sold for $1 to one Benjamin Carter, purchased from, Evelyn squinted at the name, Dalton Enterprises LLC. That name meant nothing to her, but underneath the bill of sale was a letter, typed on expensive letterhead with the same company name. The letter was brief and chilling in its corporate coldness. Mr. Carter, this letter confirms our agreement. In exchange for your permanent silence regarding the events of June 14th, 15, Dalton Enterprises transfers full ownership of the horse known as Midnight Storm to you, along with a one-time payment of $75,000. You agree never to race, show, breed, or publicly display this animal. You agree never to discuss the events in question with any party. Violation of these terms will result in immediate legal action and nullification of all agreements. Consider yourself fortunate. R.D. Evelyn read the letter 3 times, her hands shaking harder each time. Silence about what? What had Benjamin witnessed? And what had happened that was worth paying $75,000 to cover up? In 1990s money, no less. She looked at the date again. June 14th, 15, 34 years ago. She tried to remember where they'd been, what they'd been doing. Their daughter Patricia had been, just a baby, maybe 9 months old. They'd been living in that terrible apartment in Bozeman, barely scraping by while Benjamin worked 3 jobs. And then suddenly, Evelyn's memory crystallized. They'd moved. Benjamin had come home one night and announced they had enough for a down payment on the ranch. She'd been shocked, asked where the money came from. He'd said he'd won it gambling in a poker game in Billings. She'd been upset at first. They couldn't afford for him to be gambling, but he'd been so happy, so proud. She'd let it go. It had been a lie. The money had come from this, from whatever he'd seen, whatever he'd agreed to never speak about. Evelyn felt like she was seeing her marriage through new eyes, and the view was disorienting. Benjamin had kept this secret for 34 years, had built their entire life, the ranch, the stability, everything, on money paid for his silence. And he'd kept Midnight Storm hidden away, honoring an agreement that lasted beyond his own death. But why? What could possibly be worth all this? A sound from outside interrupted her thoughts, the rumble of an engine coming up the drive. Evelyn went to the window and saw a pickup truck pulling up, old and battered, with Clearwater Feed and Supply painted on the door. A man got out, late 50s, lean and weathered, wearing a feed store cap. He spotted Midnight grazing in the paddock and stopped dead in his tracks. Then his eyes swung to the house, and even from a distance, Evelyn could see the panic on his face. He knew. Whoever this man was, he knew about the horse. Evelyn walked out onto the porch, crossing her arms. The man approached slowly, hands raised slightly, like he was approaching a spooked animal. "Ma'am," he said carefully. "My name's Wade Brennan. I've been helping look after your horse." "My husband's horse," Evelyn corrected coldly. "The one he apparently paid you to keep secret." Wade flinched. "Yes, ma'am. I'm sorry you had to find out like this. Ben, Mr. Carter, he came to me about 17 years ago, set up an arrangement, asked me to keep feeding the horse, keep it quiet. He was real specific about that. Keep it quiet. Said if anything ever happened to him, I was to keep coming until the money ran out. And you didn't think to contact his widow, to tell me there was a horse locked in my barn." Wade looked at his boots. "Ma'am, he paid me real well to follow instructions, not ask questions. And he made it clear, absolutely clear, that nobody could know, especially not you." "Especially not me," Evelyn's voice rose. "Why especially not me?" "I don't know, ma'am. He never said. Just said it was safer for you if you didn't know anything about Midnight." Safer? What the hell had Benjamin been protecting her from? Evelyn invited Wade inside, offering him coffee that she made from supplies she'd brought from Billings. They sat at the kitchen table, now uncovered and wiped down, while Wade told her everything he knew. It wasn't much. "Ben approached me in the summer of '07, Wade explained, his weathered hands wrapped around the coffee mug. "Walked into my feed store one afternoon and asked if I did private deliveries, discreet ones. I figured he was growing something he shouldn't be, if you know what I mean, but the money was good, and I've never been one to judge. How much did he pay you?" $500 a month, cash, every month like clockwork, even after he passed. The payments came from some account I didn't ask about. Then a few months ago, I got a notice that the account was running low. I figured I had maybe another year before it dried up completely. Evelyn did the math in her head. $500 a month for 17 years, over $100,000 just for feed deliveries. The trust Benjamin had set up must have been substantial. "Did he ever say anything about why?" she pressed. "About where the horse came from?" Wade shook his head. "Only thing he ever said was that Midnight was a good horse that got caught up in bad business. Said the horse didn't deserve to pay for human mistakes. Ben seemed like he carried a lot of guilt about it." What kind of bad business?" "Ma'am, I truly don't know, and I got the sense that asking would have ended our arrangement real quick." Evelyn sat back, frustrated. Every answer led to more questions. "The automatic feeders," she said. "When were those installed?" "That was me, about 5 years ago. Ben had set up the original system before he died, but it was basic. I upgraded it, made sure it could go longer between refills. Seemed like the right thing to do given what I was being paid. And in all these years, you never thought it was strange? Never wondered if maybe you should tell someone?" Wade met her eyes steadily. "Ma'am, I grew up in ranch country. I've learned that sometimes people have their reasons for doing things that don't make sense to outsiders. Ben was a good man. Everyone in town said so. I figured if he wanted that horse hidden and cared for, there was a good reason. Wasn't my place to second-guess him." Evelyn couldn't argue with that logic, even though it frustrated her. In a small town, you learn to mind your own business. That's how people survived out here. After Wade left, promising to bring proper feed and supplements for Midnight within the hour, Evelyn went back to Benjamin's office and continued searching. There had to be more. The letter from Dalton Enterprises mentioned events on specific dates. If Benjamin had been the kind of man to keep records this meticulous, he might have kept something about that too. She found it in the bottom drawer of the filing cabinet, in an unmarked envelope tucked behind old tax returns. A journal, small, leather-bound, with maybe 20 pages of entries, all in Benjamin's handwriting. The first entry was dated June 14th, 34 years ago. Evelyn's hands trembled as she read, "I don't know if I'll ever show this to anyone. Probably shouldn't. But I need to write it down, need to make sense of what I saw. I took the job at Dalton's training facility because it paid 3 times what I was making at the Wilson Ranch. Ev was home with baby Patricia, we had bills piling up, and I couldn't say no to that kind of money. It was just supposed to be overnight stable work, feeding, mucking, basic care, easy work. They have some beautiful horses there, million-dollar animals, some of them. I was told never to touch Midnight Storm. He was Mr. Dalton's personal project, being prepped for the big races. They had high hopes for him. On June 14th, I was doing my regular evening rounds when I heard shouting from the training track. It was almost midnight. Nobody should have been out there. I went to check and saw Mr. Dalton and 2 other men I didn't recognize. They had Midnight Storm out there, and the entry broke off. The next page had been torn out. 3 pages, actually, removed carefully right along the binding. Evelyn could see the ragged edges where they'd been. The journal picked up again on June 16th. I've made a deal with the devil. Dalton knows I saw. He's offered me money and the horse. My choice between that and a threat I won't repeat here. I'm taking the money, I'm taking Midnight, and I'm never speaking of this again. God forgive me. Ev can never know. If she knew where our new life came from, it would destroy her. She's too good for this, too pure. She'll think I won it gambling. Let her think that. Let her be happy. Midnight Storm will live out his days here, in peace. It's the least I can do. The only thing I can do to make this right. That was the last entry. Evelyn sat there, the journal in her lap, feeling like the ground had opened up beneath her. Benjamin had witnessed something bad enough that a wealthy man had paid him off and given him a racehorse to keep quiet. Something bad enough that Benjamin had ripped pages from his own private journal to bury the memory. But what? What had he seen? She thought about the letter's cold, threatening tone. Consider yourself fortunate. What did that mean? Fortunate to be bought off instead of, what? Hurt? Killed? Evelyn shuddered. The Benjamin she'd known had been gentle, kind, honest to a fault. But he'd also been desperately poor with a new baby and a struggling wife. She could imagine him being faced with an impossible choice and taking the money, taking the horse, building their dream on a foundation of forced silence. She understood it. She didn't like it, but she understood it. The question now was, what did she do with this information? Wade returned an hour later with proper horse feed, supplements, and the business card for a veterinarian who specialized in horses. Doc Hartley, Wade said, handing over the card. She's the best in 3 counties. Tell her I sent you and that it's urgent. She'll come out. Evelyn called Dr. Hartley, who agreed to come first thing the next morning. That night, Evelyn slept in her old bedroom, dusty and strange after so many years, and listened to Midnight moving around in the paddock outside. The stallion seemed restless, adjusting to his new freedom. She understood how he felt. Dr. Cordelia Hartley arrived at 8 a.m. sharp in a truck that had seen better days, but probably could outlast a nuclear war. She was in her early 40s, with sun-weathered skin and sharp, intelligent eyes that took in everything. So this is the mystery horse Wade's been feeding for years, she said, approaching Midnight with the confident ease of someone who'd worked with difficult animals her entire life. I wondered if he actually existed, or if Wade had found a creative way to supplement his income. Midnight allowed the examination, though he remained skittish, dancing sideways whenever Dr. Hartley tried to handle his hooves. He's malnourished, but not critically so, the vet announced after 40 minutes of poking and prodding. The automatic systems kept him alive, but barely. His hooves are a disaster. I'll need to bring a farrier out here, maybe sedate him for it. He's got some muscle wasting from lack of exercise, skin issues from the poor living conditions, but honestly, she patted Midnight's neck with obvious admiration. He's tough. Most horses wouldn't have survived what he's been through. This boy's a fighter. Can you tell how old he is? Dr. Hartley checked Midnight's teeth. I'd say late 20s, maybe 30. That's remarkable for a horse that's been living in those conditions. His genetics must be excellent. 30 years old. That tracked with the timeline. Midnight had been 3 or 4 when Benjamin brought him home. There's something else. Dr. Hartley said, running her hand along Midnight's left shoulder. "Come look at this." Evelyn approached. The vet pointed to a small, faded mark on Midnight's hide. "That's a tattoo. Thoroughbreds get them for identification, usually on the upper lip. But this one's on the shoulder and it's been obscured. Someone tried to remove it or alter it." "Can you read it?" "Not clearly, but I know someone who might be able to help with that. There's a thoroughbred registry investigator, guy named Cole Andrews, who specializes in tracking down stolen or misidentified horses. If this horse has a history, Cole can find it." Evelyn hesitated. Every instinct told her that digging deeper was dangerous. Benjamin had spent 34 years keeping Midnight hidden for a reason. The agreement he'd signed had been clear. No public display, no registration, silence. But Benjamin was gone, and Evelyn was tired of living in the dark. "Call him," she said. Cole Andrews arrived 2 days later, driving a rental car that looked absurdly out of place on the rural Montana roads. He was younger than Evelyn expected, maybe 35, with the kind of eager energy that suggested he lived for this kind of mystery. "Mrs. Carter," he said, shaking her hand firmly. "Doctor, Hartley sent me photos of the tattoo. If I'm right about what I'm seeing, this case could be significant." He spent an hour photographing Midnight from every angle, taking detailed shots of the obscured tattoo, making notes in a tablet. The whole time, he kept muttering to himself, cross-referencing something on his phone. Finally, he turned to Evelyn. "I need to make some calls. Do you have somewhere we can talk privately?" They went into the house. Cole pulled up files on his tablet, showing Evelyn a database of registered thoroughbreds. The tattoo system changed over the years, but this marking, even altered, has characteristics that match a specific period. "I can narrow it down to horses registered between—" "Midnight Storm," Evelyn interrupted. "That's his name. He raced in the early 90s. Cole's head snapped up. "You know his identity." "I know what my husband called him. I know he was supposedly sold for $1 34 years ago. What I don't know is why." Cole's fingers flew across his tablet. Then he stopped, his face going pale. Oh, hell. "What?" He turned the screen toward her. It showed a news article from 34 years ago, headline blaring, "Promising Racehorse Euthanized After Training Injury. Dalton Stables Mourns Loss." The article described how Midnight Storm had suffered a catastrophic injury during a night training session and had to be put down. There was a quote from Russell Dalton, owner of Dalton Enterprises, expressing his grief over losing such a promising animal. "This was published June 16th, 34 years ago, Cole said quietly. 2 days after the dates in that letter you showed me. Mrs. Carter, according to official records, this horse has been dead for over 3 decades. Evelyn felt cold spreading through her chest. "But he's not dead. He's in my paddock." "Exactly. Which means this article was a lie. Which means Russell Dalton reported a horse dead that he'd actually sold. Illegally, I might add, since there's no record of the sale in the official registry. The question is why? What happened that night that was worth faking a horse's death?" Evelyn thought about the torn pages in Benjamin's journal, about the threats veiled in corporate language, about her husband's guilt, carried silently for decades. "My husband saw something," she said slowly. "Something bad enough that Dalton paid him off to keep quiet. And part of that payoff was taking the horse, hiding it, making sure no one ever knew Midnight had survived." Cole was nodding, his investigator's mind clearly racing. In thoroughbred racing, there are a lot of reasons someone might want a horse to disappear. Insurance fraud is the most common. If Midnight Storm was insured for a lot of money, Dalton could have collected on a death claim while keeping the horse alive. But why give the horse to Benjamin? Why not just actually kill it? Cole's expression darkened. "Because whatever your husband witnessed that night made it impossible for Dalton to go through with it. Maybe he saw them trying to hurt the horse or fake an injury. Maybe he intervened. Either way, Dalton was caught, and the easiest way to clean up the mess was to pay off the witness and make the horse disappear quietly." Evelyn thought about Benjamin, barely 26 years old, stumbling onto something terrible and having to make an impossible choice. Take the money and the horse, or what? Lose his job? Face threats? Worse? What do we do now? She asked. Cole closed his tablet. That depends on you. Russell Dalton is still alive. He's in his 80s now, mostly retired, but still very wealthy and very connected. If you want to pursue this, I can help you file reports with the Racing Commission, expose the fraud. But Mrs. Carter, I'll be honest. People like Dalton have ways of making problems disappear. Your husband kept this secret for over 30 years for a reason. He kept it secret because he was afraid, Evelyn said quietly. But I'm not afraid. Not anymore. Cole studied her for a long moment, then nodded. Okay then, let's find out what really happened to Midnight Storm. Cole spent the next 3 days digging through records, making calls, and building a case. What he uncovered made Evelyn's blood run cold. Midnight Storm had been insured for $1.2 million, an enormous sum for a moderately successful racehorse. The policy had been taken out just 6 weeks before his alleged death. Dalton had collected the full amount, claiming catastrophic injury during training. It's textbook insurance fraud, Cole explained, spreading documents across Evelyn's kitchen table. But here's where it gets interesting. I found veterinary records from the days leading up to the accident. Midnight was completely healthy. No indication of any injury. No reason he should have suddenly broken down during training. So what happened that night? I think Dalton was going to stage an injury. Maybe drug the horse to make him stumble. Fake a break, have a complicit vet sign off on euthanasia, quick, clean, fraudulent. Except your husband was there and saw something he shouldn't have seen. Evelyn picked up Benjamin's journal, running her fingers over the torn edges where he'd ripped out the pages. He saved Midnight's life. He did. And then he kept him hidden for 34 years. Cole's phone rang. He glanced at the screen, and his expression shifted. It's my contact at the Racing Commission. I sent them everything yesterday, he answered, putting it on speaker. Cole, what the hell have you gotten yourself into? The voice on the other end was tight with stress. I got a call this morning from Russell Dalton's lawyers. They're threatening action if you don't cease your investigation immediately. We haven't even filed anything official yet, Cole protested. How do they know? Because Dalton still has friends everywhere in this industry. Someone tipped him off. They're claiming harassment, defamation, all kinds of legal threats. But here's the thing, Cole. I did some digging on my end before they shut me down. There was an investigation into Dalton back then, right after Midnight's death was reported. It was buried. Someone high up killed it. Evelyn felt ice in her veins. How high up? State Racing Commissioner at the time. Guy named Vernon Hayes. He died 10 years ago. But the rumor was always that he was in Dalton's pocket. If that's true, this thing goes deeper than simple insurance fraud. After the call ended, Cole looked at Evelyn with concern. They know we're looking, and they're already trying to shut us down. Mrs. Carter, if you want to stop now, I understand. This could get ugly. Evelyn thought about Benjamin carrying this secret for decades, thought about Midnight locked in darkness for 15 years, surviving on automatic feeders and sheer will. Thought about all the lies and all the fear that had shaped her life in ways she'd never understood until now. No, she said firmly, we keep going. But that night, things escalated. Evelyn was awakened by Midnight's screaming. Not whinnying, screaming, the sound a horse makes when it's terrified or in pain. She bolted out of bed and ran outside in her nightgown, barefoot, her heart hammering. Someone was in the paddock, a figure barely visible in the darkness, approaching Midnight with something in their hands. The stallion was backing away, rearing up, wild with fear. "Get away from him!" Evelyn shouted. The figure spun toward her. In the moonlight, she saw it was a man, middle-aged, wearing dark clothes. He had a syringe in his hand. "Mrs. Carter," the man said, his voice artificially calm, "go back inside. This doesn't concern you." "Like hell it doesn't. That's my horse. Get off my property." The man took a step toward her. "Mr. Dalton wants you to understand something. This situation can be resolved quietly. The horse is old. It would be a mercy to let him go peacefully." Mr. Dalton is prepared to compensate you generously for your cooperation. He wants to kill Midnight, Evelyn said, her voice shaking with rage, just like he tried to do 34 years ago. Mr. Dalton wants to correct a mistake. This animal should never have existed past June 15th, 34 years ago. Your husband was paid well to ensure that didn't become a problem. Now he's gone, and the problem has resurfaced. Evelyn saw red. She grabbed a fence post that had fallen nearby, old and weathered but solid, and brandished it like a weapon. You have exactly 10 seconds to get off my land before I call the sheriff and report you for trespassing and attempted animal cruelty. The man hesitated, clearly not expecting this kind of resistance from a 73-year-old woman. You're making a mistake. 9, 8, 7. He backed toward the fence. This isn't over. Mr. Dalton has resources you can't imagine. He's made problems bigger than you disappear before. 6, 5. The man climbed the fence and disappeared into the darkness. Evelyn heard an engine start, saw headlights flare, and watched a black SUV speed down her driveway. Her hands were shaking so hard she dropped the fence post. Midnight approached her cautiously, his sides heaving, still frightened. She reached out and touched his neck, feeling his rapid heartbeat, and something in her broke open. They'd come to kill him. Dalton was still so afraid of the truth coming out that he'd sent someone to murder a horse in the middle of the night. Evelyn pulled out her phone. She'd insisted Cole help her set up a signal booster and called him. They just tried to kill Midnight, she said without preamble. A man broke into my paddock with a syringe. He mentioned Dalton by name. Cole swore. Are you okay? Is the horse okay? We're fine. I scared him off. But Cole, this is real. Dalton is scared enough to resort to this. Which means we have him, Cole said, and she could hear the fierce satisfaction in his voice. People don't try to silence you unless you're onto something big. I'm calling the sheriff, and I'm calling the racing commission back. This time, we're not asking permission. We're going public. Will that keep us safe? Safer than staying quiet. Once this is out in the open, Dalton can't make you disappear without massive attention. It's our best play. Evelyn looked at Midnight, standing in the moonlight, his dark coat silvered by the glow. This horse had been a prisoner for most of his life because of one man's greed and fear. Benjamin had done his best to keep him safe, but that safety had come at the cost of truth. It was time to end this. Do it, Evelyn said. Tell them everything. The story broke 3 days later. Cole had connections at a major investigative journalism outlet that specialized in sports corruption. Within 48 hours of receiving his files, they'd verified the insurance fraud, found 3 other suspicious horse deaths connected to Dalton over the years, and uncovered the paper trail of payoffs that had kept Vernon Hayes looking the other way. The headline read, Racing Industry Titan, Russell Dalton accused of decades-long insurance fraud, horse declared dead in 1990s, found alive in Montana. Midnight's story went viral, the image of him grazing peacefully at Clearwater Ridge, accompanied by the tale of Benjamin's 34-year secret, captured the public imagination. People loved the narrative. The humble ranch hand who'd saved a horse from a corrupt millionaire, the widow who'd finally exposed the truth, the stallion who'd survived against impossible odds. Russell Dalton's lawyers issued immediate denials. They claimed the horse at Clearwater Ridge couldn't possibly be Midnight's Storm, that the tattoo evidence was inconclusive, that this was all a publicity stunt. But the DNA testing Cole had quietly arranged told a different story. Midnight's lineage, traced through genetic markers, matched Midnight Storm's registered bloodline perfectly. The Racing Commission had no choice but to open a formal investigation. The insurance company that had paid out the $1.2 million claim 34 years ago filed a fraud lawsuit. Other victims came forward. Trainers and stable hands who'd witnessed Dalton's operation over the years but had been too afraid to speak up. The dam broke, and Dalton's empire crumbled. Evelyn watched it all unfold from her kitchen table, coffee in hand, with Midnight visible through the window. Dr. Hartley had been coming twice a week, working on rehabilitating him. A farrier had finally managed to trim his overgrown hooves. He was gaining weight, his coat beginning to shine again. He looked more like the magnificent animal in Benjamin's old photograph every day. "You did it," Patricia said over the phone, her voice full of wonder. "Mom, you actually took down Russell Dalton." "I didn't do anything except open a barn door," Evelyn replied. "Your father did the hard part. He saved Midnight when it mattered. He just couldn't bring himself to expose the truth." "Are you angry with him for lying all those years?" Evelyn considered the question. "No, I understand why he did it. He was young and scared and trying to build a life for us. Would I have preferred the truth? Yes. But I can't be angry at a man who carried that weight alone for so long." What she didn't tell Patricia was that she'd found another entry in Benjamin's journal, tucked in the very back, written just weeks before his death. "I'm sick. The doctors say it's my heart. Could be months, could be years. I keep thinking I should tell Ev about Midnight, about the money, about all of it. But every time I try, I look at her and I can't. She's so happy here. Our life is good. Why poison it now? Maybe that's cowardice. Probably is. But I'm tired of carrying this. When I'm gone, Ev, if you ever find out, I'm sorry. I did what I thought was right at the time. I saved a horse's life and built our dream with blood money. I don't know if that makes me good or bad. I just know I loved you more than I feared the consequences. B." Evelyn had cried reading it, but they were different tears than she'd shed 15 years ago at his funeral. These were tears of understanding, of forgiveness, of goodbye said properly for the first time. The legal proceedings took months, but eventually settlements were reached. The insurance company recovered a portion of their losses. Dalton, facing both criminal charges and civil lawsuits, agreed to a plea deal that included substantial fines and a permanent ban from the racing industry. And Midnight was officially declared alive and returned to registry status. But Evelyn retained full ownership. She had offers, museums wanted him, racing historians wanted to study him, wealthy collectors offered absurd amounts of money. She turned them all down. "He's staying here," she told Cole when he visited to deliver the final paperwork. "He's earned his peace," Cole smiled. "What about you? You've earned some peace too." Evelyn looked around the ranch, no longer abandoned, no longer a tomb for memories. She'd been working on it steadily, fixing fences, clearing overgrowth, making it live again. Wade had offered to help, refusing payment, saying it was the least he could do. Even Dr. Hartley came by more than medically necessary, usually bringing coffee and staying to chat. The place felt alive again, like it had when Benjamin was here, but different, better in some ways. Built on truth this time, not secrets. "I think I'm already there," Evelyn said. Spring came to Clearwater Ridge with a riot of wildflowers and the sound of water rushing in the creek. Evelyn was 74 now, and she'd never felt more vital. She'd developed a routine. Every morning at sunrise, she'd walk out to the paddock with an apple or a carrot, and Midnight would come to greet her, his dark eyes soft with trust that had taken months to build. She'd brush him while the coffee brewed, talking to him about nothing and everything, the weather, the news, her plans for the day, memories of Benjamin. "Your dad would have loved to see this," she told Midnight one particular morning, 6 months after the story broke. "You running free, getting fat on good grass, no more hiding, no more fear." Midnight snorted softly and nuzzled her shoulder, leaving a smear of apple juice on her jacket. She laughed. Patricia had visited twice since the revelation, bringing her teenage grandchildren, Benjamin's grandchildren, to meet the horse their grandfather had saved. Marcus had called from his new posting in Germany. His voice, full of complicated emotions about discovering his father, had harbored such a massive secret. But he'd come around eventually. They all had. The ranch itself had become something of a minor tourist attraction, though Evelyn controlled access strictly. She'd allowed one documentary crew to film Midnight's story, with the proceeds going to rescue organizations for retired racehorses. The rest of the time, she kept the place private, sanctuary for herself and the Stallion who'd brought truth back into her life. Wade still stopped by weekly, no longer for clandestine feed deliveries, but for coffee and conversation. They'd become friends, bound by their shared secret-keeping past and their relief at finally being free of it. Dr. Hartley had declared Midnight in remarkable health for his age. "He's got good years left," she'd said during the last checkup. "You did right by him, Evelyn. You both did." One afternoon in late May, Evelyn was sitting on the porch when Cole's car pulled up the drive. He'd been coming less frequently now that the legal matters were settled, but he still checked in occasionally. He claimed it was professional thoroughness. Evelyn suspected he just liked visiting. "I have news," he said, climbing the porch steps with that familiar, eager energy. "The Racing Commission is establishing a new whistleblower protection program. They're calling it the Benjamin Carter Initiative. It'll protect stable workers and trainers who report fraud or abuse." Evelyn felt her throat tighten. "They're naming it after him. They wanted to honor the man who saved a horse at personal cost and kept him safe for decades. I hope that's okay. More than okay. It was perfect." Benjamin's secret, the burden he'd carried alone for so long, was being transformed into something that would protect others from having to make the impossible choices he'd faced. "He would have been embarrassed by the attention," Evelyn said, smiling through tears. "But he would have been proud too." Cole sat down beside her. They watched Midnight in comfortable silence, the stallion rolling in the grass like a colt, clearly enjoying his freedom. "Do you ever regret it?" Cole asked. "Opening that barn door? You could have just sold the property, never known any of this?" Evelyn thought about it. The past 6 months had been exhausting, stressful, sometimes frightening, but they'd also been the most alive she'd felt in 15 years. "No," she said firmly. "Midnight deserved to be free. The truth deserved to come out. And I deserved to know who my husband really was. Not the perfect memory I'd built up, but the complicated, flawed, brave man who saved a horse's life and built our happiness on a foundation of secrets he thought were protecting me. And now we're both free. Midnight from his barn, me from the past. It's a good feeling." That night, Evelyn did something she hadn't done since Benjamin died. She pulled out their old photo albums and really looked at them, not with grief, but with clear eyes. She could see it now, the subtle tension in Benjamin's smile in photos from that first year at the ranch, the way he'd always steered her away from the far barn. Small tells she'd missed because she hadn't known to look for them, but she could also see the love. That had been real. The life they'd built together had been real, even if its foundation had been complicated. She found the old Derby Day photo and placed it on the mantel, right where she could see it every day. Benjamin, young and nervous, holding the secret that would shape the rest of their lives. Midnight, just beginning his long journey from racehorse to hidden prisoner to symbol of truth revealed, and herself smiling at the camera, blissfully unaware that she was standing at the beginning of a story that wouldn't end for 34 years. "Thank you," she whispered to the photo, "for saving him, for building this life, for trusting that eventually I'd be strong enough to handle the truth." The photo didn't answer, but Midnight whinnied from his paddock, settling down for the night. Some secrets, Evelyn had learned, were kept out of love, and some secrets needed to be broken for freedom to exist. She'd finally found the wisdom to know the difference. If you've stayed with me until the end of Evelyn's story, thank you, really. In a world where we're all moving so fast, where attention is fractured into 1,000 pieces, you chose to spend this time with a 73-year-old widow and a horse that survived the impossible. There's something in this story that I hope resonates with you. Maybe it's about the secrets we keep and why we keep them. Maybe it's about the courage it takes to open doors we've kept locked for years. Maybe it's simply about how love, for a person, for an animal, for truth, can endure longer than we ever imagined possible. Benjamin kept his secret because he thought it would protect Evelyn. Evelyn revealed it because she understood that some protections become prisons. Both of them were right. Both of them were wrong. That's what it means to be human, to make impossible choices with incomplete information and hope for the best. And Midnight, He's still there at Clearwater Ridge, grazing in his paddock, rolling in the grass, living the life he should have had 3 decades ago. If horses could forgive, I think he'd forgive Benjamin for the years in darkness. I think he already has. Before you go, I want to ask you something. I want to ask you, have you ever discovered a truth that changed how you saw your own past? Have you ever had to decide between keeping a secret and setting something free? If Evelyn's story moved you, hit that like button. If you want to hear more stories about ordinary people facing extraordinary choices, subscribe to this channel. And please, drop a comment telling me what city or town you're watching from. I love seeing how far these stories travel. Remember, sometimes the most powerful thing we can do is open a door we've been afraid to touch. Sometimes what we find on the other side isn't what we expected, but it's exactly what we needed. Until next time, take care of yourselves. And if you have secrets weighing you down, maybe it's time to let them see the light.